The earliest point anyone agreed on came before there was any mystery to chase. It started at a working place where routine mattered and small changes stood out. A few people held responsibility there every day, checking the same spots, handling the same items, following the same steps. Their job depended on noticing what belonged and what did not. That simple habit later became crucial. These were not casual passers-by. They were people who returned on schedule, and they relied on memory because the work required consistency. They knew what had been left behind, what had been cleaned, and what had been secured. If something new showed up, it meant extra risk, extra questions, or extra paperwork. They also knew who normally had access and who did not. So the stage was set by ordinary rules, regular inspections, limited entry, and a clear sense of what normal looked like. That mattered because it narrowed the possibilities before anything even happened. When a change came, it could not hide inside general chaos. It landed in a place where people paid attention and where minutes and movements were tracked without anyone trying to track a mystery. It began with something small and oddly specific, a message that had not existed a moment earlier. It appeared in a place the witnesses had just looked at or had just passed by, with no reason to expect anything new there. This was not a long-forgotten note turning up during a deep search. It was a fresh arrival, in plain reach, in plain view, and because the timing felt impossible, attention snapped to it immediately. The message took a simple form, something written, something readable, something meant to be understood. That simplicity made it worse, not better, because it removed the usual excuses. People checked again, not out of curiosity, but out of disbelief. They measured the moment against what they had just seen seconds before. They started testing the most basic question. Had anyone been close enough to place it there without being noticed? No one could point to a clear opportunity. Reactions shifted fast from surprise to suspicion. Eyes went to hands, then to pockets, then to the nearest exits, as if the answer had to be hiding in ordinary movement. But the witnesses kept circling back to the same stubborn detail. It had not been there, and then it was. That single change forced a decision in real time. Treat it as a prank, treat it as a warning, or treat it as evidence. Whatever it was, it demanded to be dealt with. The moment the message got noticed, one person did not wait for permission or agreement. They started recording what mattered before memory could shift. Not later, not after a discussion, right then. Words got copied down in the order they appeared. Line breaks, spelling, odd marks, anything that could be argued about later went onto the page while the original still sat in front of them. Others helped in the only way that counted at that point. They checked the work as it happened. A second set of eyes followed along, confirming each character, stopping on anything unclear. If there was a symbol, it got sketched. If spacing looked deliberate, it got noted. The goal was simple and urgent. Create a version that could survive even if the real thing did not. That record became the first hard trace of the event. It fixed the message in time, tied to a specific moment, and it narrowed what could be claimed later. People could still argue about meaning, but they could not easily change the text itself. In a case like this, that mattered more than opinions, because once something vanished, the only evidence left was what got captured fast. Not long after it had been seen and copied, the message no longer stayed put. It vanished fast between one check and the next, and the situation made that hard to dismiss. There had been no obvious window for a casual prank, no relaxed moment when someone could have taken it without being noticed. This was the point where curiosity turned into alarm. If it could disappear, it could also have been moved, hidden, or destroyed. The first reaction had been simple and immediate. Look everywhere. The people nearest to it checked the exact spot again, then widened the search step by step. They inspected nearby surfaces and edges, then the places a hand could reach quickly, then the places a person could use to conceal something in seconds. They watched each other too, because once the object was gone, suspicion became part of the process. The goal was basic: recover the original before it changed hands again. Nothing turned up. No scraps, no smudged trace, no sign it had fallen or been brushed away. The more they looked, the clearer the problem became. The only solid thing left was the record made earlier. That single act of writing it down now carried the entire weight of the event. The missing message created a new urgency because without the original, every next step depended on memory and notes. And the search, despite its speed, ended in a blank. Once the search failed, the people closest to the incident faced a choice. They could keep trading details as gossip, or they could put it on record. That shift happened quickly. Statements were written down while memories still matched. Times were listed. Locations were fixed. The wording that had been copied earlier was attached as a reference. The event stopped being a loose story and became a case file. A formal report forced order onto confusion. Each witness had to separate what they saw from what they assumed. One person described when they first noticed the message. Another described how close they stood when it vanished. Someone else confirmed who searched, where they searched, and what was not found. Small disagreements appeared immediately, but they were documented too. Paperwork did not solve the mystery. It preserved the problem. Then the account moved beyond private notes. An entry in a diary locked in a date. A short newspaper item turned the incident into public knowledge. An official letter requested attention from people outside the original group. Those steps changed the stakes. A prank now carried risk. An honest mistake became harder to admit, and a strange disappearance, once unprovable, gained something rare, a trail of documents that others could challenge, compare, and revisit. After the report became public, outside eyes arrived with one goal: make the event happen again. They returned to the exact spot where the message had been seen and timed the movements people had described, who stood where when the area had last been checked, and how long the message stayed visible. They tested a simple possibility first. People misread things under pressure. A mark, a stain, even ordinary writing could look new if someone expected a surprise. Skeptical observers then treated it like a prank. They asked who had access, who benefited from attention, and who could have placed the message quickly without being noticed. They tried common tricks: thin paper that clung and then dropped, ink that appeared darker as it dried, and writing that looked clear only from one angle. Each test had a purpose. If the effect depended on timing or viewpoint, it meant the appearance could have been staged or simply misperceived. When the prank tests failed to fully match the witness timeline, the focus shifted to the environment. Investigators checked drafts, moisture, heat, and anything that could move or erase fragile material without leaving obvious traces. They also considered concealment. A message could have been folded, tucked, or temporarily fixed in place, then removed during the confusion of the search. That idea landed hard. If someone had deliberately taken it, the disappearance stopped being magic and became motive. Then one small fact landed with real force. An additional witness came forward who had not been part of the first group, and that mattered because it reduced the chance of a shared mistake. This person described noticing the message earlier than the recorded timeline allowed. That single shift created a problem. If the time was right, the message lasted longer than reported. If the time was wrong, the record became less reliable. Investigators compared the new account against the notes made when the message was first seen. They checked routine markers people remembered easily: when someone arrived, when someone left, and the order of small actions. A discrepancy stayed. The new witness placed the message in view during a period when others insisted it had not yet appeared. That contradiction changed the balance. Misperception no longer explained everything, but a coordinated prank also looked harder to stage. One more detail sharpened it further. The witness described a feature of the message that matched the earliest real-time record, not the later retellings. That counted as corroboration, but it came packaged with the timing conflict. Skeptics used the conflict to question the entire story. Supporters used the matching detail to argue the message truly existed as described. With both in play, the case stopped feeling simple and started feeling split. In the weeks that followed, the case stopped being a local oddity and became a travelling story. A short write-up ran beyond the town's paper, then got repeated, trimmed and retold in other outlets. Each retelling kept the same hook. A message had been seen, recorded, and then vanished. That combination mattered. It sounded like proof that refused to stay put. Once it reached a wider audience, new people stepped in. Editors asked for copies of the written record. Researchers requested dates, names, and the exact wording that had been captured before it disappeared. But the more the story circulated, the more the weak points showed. Small details shifted between versions. Some sources hinted at extra notes that nobody could now produce. Missing pieces became part of the mystery. Then the case started to merge with others. Writers grouped it with older reports, where objects, documents, or markings appeared briefly, got witnessed, and then slipped out of reach. The incident no longer stood alone as one strange event. It became an example in a growing pile of similar claims, and that changed the pressure on it. People asked whether this was coincidence, copying, or a pattern of evidence that vanished on schedule. Years later, a new set of eyes returned to the case, not to chase theories, but to audit the record. An archivist traced the earliest notes, the first published account, and the later summaries that repeated them. The aim stayed simple: find what could be checked, line by line. That process immediately separated two things people had blended together: what witnesses had written down at the time, and what others later said they must have meant. The review then looked for what should have existed but did not. Original pages went missing. Dates did not always match. Some versions included details that appeared nowhere in the first reports, and those details always made the mystery sound cleaner and more dramatic. Even the recorded wording of the message showed drift, as if retelling slowly replaced copying. The investigator could show how the story travelled, but not always how the facts did. In the end, the later review drew hard boundaries. It confirmed that a message had been reported, that it had been documented quickly, and that it had later not been found when people searched. But it could not prove the message's exact wording beyond the earliest trace, and it could not prove how it disappeared. The missing originals mattered as much as the surviving ones. The case stayed documented and still incomplete. By today, the core fact stayed stubbornly simple. The message itself never turned up again. No second copy surfaced. No hidden stash got found in a later renovation or a forgotten file. What remained were the records made at the time and the chain of people who said they handled the situation. That left the case standing on paperwork and memory, not on the object that started it. With the message missing, the strongest explanations depended on what the documents supported. A deliberate removal stayed high on the list because it required the fewest miracles and matched how quickly the search failed. Misperception never vanished as a possibility because stress and expectation bent attention in predictable ways. A prank or staged display also fit, but only if someone controlled access and timing tightly. None of those explanations closed the gap completely, because each one asked the viewer to accept at least one unlikely step that no witness ever confirmed. So the case ended where it began, with an ordinary place and ordinary routines that once made the message so obvious when it appeared. Life carried on in that same practical world. The difference was that one brief moment never resolved, and it never stopped echoing.